Immigration enforcement is one of those topics in the United States that never truly disappears. It comes and goes from headlines, but it's always there, quietly shaping conversations about law, identity, safety, and fairness. And right now, it's back in focus in a big way. Over the past several months, immigration enforcement actions have sparked renewed attention across the country. Some of that attention comes from official policy changes, some from court rulings, and some from specific incidents that captured public attention almost overnight. Together, they've reopened debates that many Americans feel have never really been resolved. What makes this moment different isn't just what's happening, but how people are responding to it. The reactions reveal a country that is deeply divided, but also deeply conflicted. To understand why immigration enforcement creates such strong reactions, it helps to understand how it actually works. Immigration enforcement in the U.S. is carried out by federal agencies operating under laws passed by Congress and interpreted by the courts. Agents on the ground don't write those laws, but they are the ones enforcing them, often in difficult, fast-moving situations. On paper, enforcement sounds straightforward. In reality, it rarely is. Immigration cases involve people, families, workplaces, and communities. Enforcement can happen at borders, during traffic stops, at job sites, or through administrative processes that most people never see. And when enforcement moves from paperwork to physical action, emotions tend to rise quickly. For many Americans, strict immigration enforcement represents stability. They see it as the government doing what it's supposed to do, enforcing the law. From this viewpoint, inconsistency is the real problem. If laws exist but aren't enforced, trust in the system erodes. Supporters of this perspective often argue that border security and enforcement are necessary for national sovereignty, economic stability, and public safety. But for others, immigration enforcement feels very different when it plays out in real life. When enforcement actions involve visible force, detention, or separation from family members, the issue stops being abstract. It becomes personal. Videos circulate, stories spread, and suddenly, the conversation shifts from policy to humanity. Recent incidents involving immigration authorities have intensified this shift. Some enforcement actions have been widely criticized after resulting in serious injury or death. These moments tend to become flashpoints, not because they represent the entire system, but because they force people to confront the consequences of enforcement when something goes wrong. Public reaction to these incidents has been swift and emotional. Protests have taken place in several cities, calling for investigations, accountability, and changes to enforcement practices. At the same time, others have pushed back, arguing that isolated incidents shouldn't define an entire agency or policy framework. What's important to understand here is that public opinion on immigration enforcement isn't as clear-cut as online debates often make it seem. Polls consistently show that many Americans hold mixed views. They may support enforcement of immigration laws, while also expressing concern about how that enforcement is carried out. Those two positions aren't mutually exclusive, even if political conversations often frame them as such. Another major factor shaping the current debate is the role of the courts. Immigration enforcement doesn't operate in a vacuum. Lawsuits filed by advocacy groups, individuals, and state governments regularly challenge enforcement practices. Judges are asked to weigh executive authority against constitutional protections, due process, and civil rights. Court rulings don't always grab headlines the way dramatic incidents do, but they quietly shape what enforcement can and cannot look like going forward. A single ruling can alter procedures nationwide, affecting thousands of cases without most people ever noticing. This slow, legal process is one of the most powerful forces influencing immigration enforcement today. Then there's the role of state and local governments. Immigration is a federal responsibility, but local law enforcement often finds itself caught in the middle. Some cities and states limit their cooperation with federal immigration authorities. Their leaders argue that when immigrant communities fear deportation, they're less likely to report crimes or cooperate with police, which can make everyone less safe. Other states take the opposite approach, emphasizing full cooperation between local and federal agencies. They argue that enforcement only works when all levels of government are aligned. The result is a country where immigration enforcement looks very different depending on geography. What happens in one city may never happen in another just a few hours away. This patchwork system adds another layer of confusion and frustration, both for immigrants and for citizens trying to understand what the rules actually are. It also fuels political tension, as state and federal officials sometimes publicly clash over who has authority and responsibility. Media coverage plays a major role in shaping how immigration enforcement is perceived. News outlets often focus on individual cases because they humanize a complex issue. Social media takes this even further, amplifying short clips and emotional moments that spread far faster than official explanations or legal context. This doesn't mean those stories aren't real or important. They are. But experts often point out that viral moments don't always represent broader trends. Still, perception matters. Once people see enforcement through the lens of a single powerful image or video, it can permanently shape how they feel about the system as a whole. Immigration enforcement is also closely tied to economic realities. Many industries in the United States rely heavily on immigrant labor, including agriculture, construction, and service sectors. Changes in enforcement priorities can lead to labor shortages, rising costs, and disruptions that affect the broader economy. These impacts often show up quietly, long after the political debates have moved on. The asylum system adds another layer of complexity. People seeking asylum are legally allowed to apply for protection, but backlogs in immigration courts mean cases can take years to resolve. During that time, individuals live in uncertainty, and enforcement agencies operate under policies that are constantly being challenged and revised. International relations are also part of the picture. Immigration enforcement policies can influence diplomatic relationships, especially with neighboring countries. Decisions made in Washington don't stop at the border. They ripple outward, affecting migration patterns, regional stability, and cooperation on other issues. As all of this unfolds, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Immigration enforcement is no longer just a legal issue. It's a test of how a society balances law, power, and human impact. It forces uncomfortable conversations about who belongs, how rules are applied, and what accountability looks like when authority is exercised. Looking ahead, most analysts agree that immigration enforcement will remain a central political issue. Meaningful changes would likely require new legislation, clearer guidelines, and sustained cooperation between branches of government. None of that is easy in a polarized environment. In the meantime, enforcement continues, court cases move forward, and communities react in different ways. Some call for stronger measures. Others push for reform. Many feel caught somewhere in between, unsure how to reconcile competing values of fairness, security, and compassion. What often gets lost in the noise is that immigration enforcement doesn't happen in theory. It happens in real places, affecting real lives, carried out by real people operating within a system that is under constant pressure. As Americans continue to debate this issue, the deeper question may not be about immigration alone. It may be about trust. Trust in institutions, trust in leadership, and trust that the system can enforce its laws without losing its sense of humanity. And that question, more than any single policy, is what keeps immigration enforcement at the center of the national conversation.